Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Altition, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today we have attorney Jonathan Steele here to talk about and discuss the protection of personal information during family law disputes and strategies for safeguarding sensitive data and maintaining privacy during divorce proceedings. Okay, that's a mouthful. Jonathan, how long are you doing today?
Hey Steve, how are you? Thanks
I'm
for
doing
having me
well.
on.
I just love this. Love this topic. It's every one of our clients worry about this. And it seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. And I know almost nothing about the technology. So you're the perfect person. And so I'm going to start with a real kind of a softball, I guess, question or the elephant in the room question. Just what is computer security?
Sure. Computer security would be any software or hardware controls around the computer itself. Cybersecurity more broadly is applicable to computer, uh, mobile devices, servers, pretty much anything that touches the internet. But to your question of computer security, it would be like antivirus software, firewalls, anything that's going to protect a computer system.
That makes sense. It all I know about it is that I think in the last 30 days I've gotten 50 emails that I haven't somehow paid for a subscription I don't have.
Those sound
So
like the phishing emails to me.
it is. So let's get into that. Why cybersecurity matters in a family law case. Why is it so important to understand this?
There's a couple reasons that come to mind. One of them would be that, at the infancy stage of a divorce case, where you might have shared access to, photo albums or iCloud or devices with your spouse, all of that access may end up getting used against you now that you're in litigation with your spouse. And so, buttoning up your controls, buttoning up your access to prevent your spouse from being able to access your data, your photos, your messages, your emails, becomes pivotal at the beginning of a divorce case. And then also, in the context of like an order of protection, being able to tie certain electronic communications to the sender can become pivotal as well.
So let's backtrack a second because you said something that I think people really need to understand and maybe have it hammered into them. And that is about the legality of testimony and the admission of testimony that revolves around social media or basically anything on the internet. They can be used, can't they?
They not only can, they are very often used. What you're posting, your photos, the captions of your photos, the comments that you're posting, anytime you're checking in somewhere, all of that activity very often finds its way into your family law dispute.
You talk about uh, one topic that I really hadn't even thought of, and it is sort of the hidden dangers of things that you just normally think, why would that matter? And one of them is like photos. Why do we need to in a divorce, or maybe think about doing, is getting rid of our photos or protecting our photos or having them not be used against us. How can a photo be used against us?
Yeah, so some of this is going to depend on the jurisdiction you find yourself in. But for instance, if you are in a parenting time dispute with your spouse and you're posting pictures or videos from a bar during your parenting time, more likely than not, your spouse is going to use that against you. And they're going to say, why is it that you are being awarded this parenting time if you're using it to be in a bar without the child? So it becomes relevant in that scenario. And also, if you are a maintenance or alimony recipient or candidate and you're seeking maintenance or alimony, and all of a sudden during your divorce case, you start dating someone and you start living with someone and traveling with them and spending holidays with them, all of those start to become disqualifying events for whether or not you're entitled to maintenance or alimony. So if you are seeking it, and your spouse gets access to your photos and they can say, look, she's traveling, she's spending holidays, she's spending nights with a paramour, putting aside the fact that it's adultery because you're still married, it might end up depriving you of what you may have otherwise been entitled to by way of alimony.
We did a Facebook Live before with the judge, and it was about things not to do when you go to court and ways to act in front of a judge. This sounds eerily the same because, like you said, a judge can see some of this stuff. And if you're going around with one of the things we say is if you're pleading poverty, don't come in with your $10,000 earrings. And this is the same kind of thing, isn't it? I mean, people should sort of act maybe like, hold it, I'm in court now when I'm doing this online.
Yeah, that's certainly a consideration. Another one to the point of don't come in with your expensive earrings or your Rolex watch while you're crying poor. There's a different name for it in different states. In Illinois, there's something called dissipation. In other states, it's just called waste.
Yep.
And if you are traveling the world with a significant other that is not your most significant other or your spouse, you may be charged with dissipation. You may spend $10,000 on a vacation to the Bahamas with your new girlfriend, and then you get back and you find out that your wife is charging you with dissipation and wants you to be awarded that non-existent $10,000 asset so that she doesn't have to pay for that trip. And maybe that would have gone unnoticed if you weren't posting about it on Instagram and on Facebook and everywhere else.
Before we get to how you stop posting, when we were talking before, you talked about one of the sort of hidden things people don't quite understand. And again, something like a trip or a picture is that there's is not only you don't know who's following you, but that thing contains data that can place you like in certain places or times. And that, it seems to me, is a huge problem because you could go into court and say, well, hold it, that was before I was, ever divorced, married even. And but they can prove stuff like that, can't they? I mean, there's this whole idea of metadata. I don't really know what it is. And so can we talk about that a little? What is metadata and why is that so dangerous?
Oftentimes, you can discover more about a file or a person by metadata than you can from the contents of the photo itself. So a photo taken on an iPhone, for instance, normally is going to have a GPS location that the photo was taken. It's going to have a time date stamp. It's going to have information about the phone that it was taken on, the kind of lens that the phone was using when it took it, whether or not there was a flash that was used. All sorts of data about the photo is attached to the photo. And some platforms like Instagram, they've gotten better about this. They strip the metadata when you upload these files or photos. But there are other platforms that aren't doing that. Or if you just text the photo to someone, or if you email the photo to someone, it's coming along with all of that metadata that's going to tell a lot about the story that you may not have known is coming with the photo.
That kind of gets to this being bigger than just Instagram or Facebook. It's ability to find information about you. And I think we talked before that there are actually companies out there who I think you termed mined metadata to turn around and sell. And that can be, I mean, that can be a terrible way to me to kind of expose yourself to.
What you're touching on is a field called data brokers, and they buy and sell your personal information. They buy and sell your address, your all of your known acquaintances, your family, your phone number, your email address, everything about you. They buy it and then they sell it to someone for as little as $1. And depending on your line of work or your personal life, that can become a physical safety risk as well as a safety risk or a litigation risk rather, if you end up going through a divorce case or pretty much any type of litigation. And anytime you're either purposefully or inadvertently exposing data, you're feeding into the data brokers, you're feeding into the ability to mine your information. So yeah, that is a huge and growing problem. There are new data brokers that are popping up all the time. And when you talk about posting videos or posting photos on Instagram, another one of those physical safety risks is if you already have a stalker, for instance, and you're posting a picture of yourself in real time on the beach on a vacation. Well, all of a sudden they know you're not home. All of a sudden they know your home is empty and maybe less secure. Whereas if you were to exercise a little restraint, wait till you got home from your vacation and then post all those photos in a batch, because as strange as this may seem, your followers don't necessarily need real-time uploads. Then you sort of leave them guessing about, are you home? Is your home occupied? So you're on better footing than if you are not uploading real-time photos.
Wow. So what can we do about this? What can a person do, especially someone who's got sort of limited understanding of just how all the social media technology works? What can we do to start making ourselves safer, especially like in a divorce or, like you said, a restraining order case?
So one of the things would be, whether you're in the middle of a family law dispute or not, now's a good time to look at your followers list, to look at your friends list and see, do I even know this person? And if not, maybe I can prune this follower. Maybe I can remove them. Maybe they don't need to see my photos. Maybe I can make my account private if it was public. That'll go a long way. If you're in the middle of a family law dispute and some of your followers are connected to your spouse, you might as well have your spouse as a follower, because whatever you're posting is going to end up in your spouse's hands. It's a good assumption to make. And you may think, okay, let me remove my spouse as a follower, but you may not think who is connected to both of us. So, pruning your followers and friends list is very important. Making sure your account is private is very important, as opposed
And
to just publicly accessible to anybody.
uh,
And then, being mindful of, do I need to post photos in real time? Can I post them at a later time? Being mindful of what's in those photos. If you have children and you're posting things about your children, you're potentially giving information to someone that might have an interest in kidnapping your child. And, the safety of your child couldn't be more important. And then, they're being mindful of metadata, of course, is important. And, there are apps for every device imaginable where you can either remove or you can change metadata. So before you're posting, before you're sending photos, maybe you want to take out the GPS coordinates. Maybe you want to change the date and time that photos were taken before you send them. And then there's some services that are just, they do this for you. If you use Proton Mail, it has the ability to strip all the metadata from your photos before they go to the recipient, whether you actively do that or not. So there are services that are mindful of this risk, and they've got your back, so to speak.
yeah. Can some of these friends and family who you're talking about, can they inadvertently pass on data that you don't want to pass on? It doesn't, they don't necessarily have to be, oh, I'm gonna show this to this person. Because it seems to me, when people sometimes will just get a picture and then they'll kind of post it on theirs because it was a cool picture. And it seems like there can be a lot of transfer that happens, organically.
I think that's a real risk. For years, I avoided all forms of social media, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. I was allergic to it. And part of the concern that I have is that, when you download these apps to your phone, for instance, your iPhone or your Android phone, it asks you to give it access to a whole bunch of permissions that it probably doesn't need. It wants access to your address book. It wants access to your location. It wants access to your calendar, to your photos, everything. And most people just they click right through that. And so I may be secure, I may be private, I may keep my contact information out of Facebook or Meta's hands by design. But if you have my contact information in your phone and you aren't quite as secure or quite as private, and you've just swiped through all of those permissions and allowed them access, now Meta has my phone number. Now Meta has my address and my birth date and my photo, not because I gave it to them, but because you did. And you probably did it inadvertently just by swiping through and just blindly clicking through allow, allow, allow.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they do end up in possession of your data um, through no fault of your own, but just because your contacts have access to your information.
So what kind of advice do you give your clients in these cases? For instance, can can you have stuff like, maybe I had pictures that I had taken before the divorce, but still it's not stuff I really wanted to have out, but it had been sent out. And I mean, is that too late to take it off your phone, or do I need to start going to my friends and relatives and say, you need to start taking stuff off about me?
What? Once your data's out there, it's pretty hard to get it back.
Yeah.
Once you've posted a photo, it may be too late. And that's one of the real problems. Is that sorry it's hard to get back, and
Yeah.
so you can't just go around to or can't expect to be able to go around to all of your friends and delete their photos or delete your information from their phones. You just have to try to be mindful on the front end and have less to clean up on the back end. As far as like advice that I give to my clients, this type of advice is a tough sell, but I try to get clients to get off of social media while their case is pending and stay off of social media until their case is over. And that's a hard sell nowadays. You're asking people to give up a limb. So for the
Yeah.
ones that say, no, I can't do it, well, then button up your privacy settings a little bit, do some pruning of your friends and followers list. And then I'll encourage people to use pseudonyms as often as possible. So give a for lack of a better term, a burner email address wherever you can, give a burner phone number wherever you can, so that not if, but when your information is leaked or breached, it's not your real information. It's information that's only tied to that particular service. So, if you have Facebook at whatever your domain name is.com, and that's the email address you use for only Facebook, it's harder for a company to correlate your data because you're not using that same email address in multiple places. It's not the same email in Netflix. It's not the same email that you're using with your gym membership. And so you're compartmentalizing so that damage is mitigated in the event of a breach or in the event of a leak. And, for the clients that don't heed the advice about, gee, maybe you can wait until your divorce is over to start dating, compartmentalization can be very important there as well. Giving a burner phone number to each of the people that you start dating, burner email for each of those people can be life or death sometimes, because you never really know who it is you're going to be meeting on a dating app. And that
Yeah.
person may turn into a stalker, and you may not want to get phone calls from that person anymore. You may not want to get emails from them. You may not want them to know where you live. And so if you've given them burner information or pseudonymous information, then you're insulating yourself, and you can cut that off pretty easily if that person turns out to be someone that you don't want to have your information. So there are a number of tips that I give to clients at the beginning of a case, but most of it just has to do with securing yourself, cutting off access that your spouse may have to your information, and making sure that they don't regain access to it.
Wow. Well, if I were to come to you at, obviously my age, I would probably the first thing I would say is, okay, what button do I push to take everything off? But it's not as simple as that. Is there are there people that you can go to help you actually things that you're talking about? Remove yourself, get yourself as clean, remove your footprint as much as you can.
Yeah, well, a couple things. One, there actually is a button. It's a button that Apple created somewhat recently. It's called Safety Check on your iPhone, and it does a pretty good job of walking you through all of the different permissions that you've given access to. It'll tell you you've shared your photo album with this person. It'll tell you that you've shared your location with this person. It'll basically lay out for you all of the different permissions that you've granted access to over the years, and it'll ask you, do you want to revoke those permissions? So it'll walk you through in an Apple-friendly way of trying to regain some of that access. So that's something you can do, and then because it was Apple, it's pretty easy. But beyond that, there are services. There's a company called Delete Me or Join Delete Me by Abind that does a good job of effortlessly removing your data from data brokers. They don't do anything that you can't do yourself. You can remove yourself manually from whitepages.com and all these different data brokers, but it's time consuming, right? So if you don't have 10 hours a day every day for the next 30 days to spend removing your data, and then do it again when they rescrape and repost your data, it's oftentimes just easier to write a check. And so a service like Delete Me, you may pay, I think it's around $100, $150 a year, and they will automate that deletion process for you. They will go in and they will submit deletion requests to all these different data brokers, thousands of them. And then they comb those records periodically. So, depending on your subscription level, they can do it monthly, they can do it quarterly, because it really is just a game of whack-a-mole. So if you
Yeah.
remove it from White Pages today, White Pages might buy that data again tomorrow and then repost it. And so you don't want to be having to do that yourself over and over and over again. It's easier to just have a service do it for you. And then, there are more comprehensive companies and services that sort of bundle all of this together. Steel Fortress, for example, is a consulting company that I started at the early stages of COVID, where we will guide you through that process, or we will do it for you, depending on how much hands-on you want us to do. And um, it's more comprehensive. It looks at you holistically at your cybersecurity posture on all of your devices and your home network and your physical security and your privacy. And we just sort of guide you through that journey that can seem overwhelming or can seem daunting from start to finish. And we are there with you along the way to help make tweaks as needed because it is a journey. It is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not a light switch where you just flip on, I'm secure one day or I'm private one day. It requires just ongoing maintenance. So
I I can't tell you how much I love that. I tell people when I was young and we had our first kid, we're in the room, and the doctor, just about as our first daughter is ready to be born, turns to me and says, "Well, do you want to cut the umbilical cord?" All I could think of to say was, "Well, there's someone in this room more capable than I am of doing this." I mean, that reminds me of that. It just, we are those people who a lot of us just we want to do it, try to do it, but if there's people out there that can do it better, always a good, thing to go to. Wow. Well, we're almost done, but I just want to ask you a couple more questions about mobile forensics. It's a thing that's going on. And I mean, there are cases where you can, get the other person's phone and start and look at it, or maybe they're going to try to get your phone. It seems to me, and they can get everything, can't they? I mean, they can get everything. But it seems to me that there's sort of of a of a good and a bad to that.
Yeah, I mean, most privacy or security tools have a good use and they have a bad use. Like a VPN, for instance, started out great. It gives you access to your office when you're away from home. It gives you the ability to spoof your location. It gives you encrypted data transfer if you're on an unsecure Wi-Fi. But then it also has a nefarious use. People use it to hide their true IP address when they're hacking. They use it to hide their activity and make it difficult to trace them. And so pretty much any tool that has a good use has a bad use. And so mobile forensics is no different. The most common or the most I guess, notorious case at the moment is Celebrite. So Celebrite is a service that is being used primarily by law enforcement that allows like the federal government to basically hack someone's iPhone or their Android device so that they can get access to it because nowadays they're getting harder and harder to get into. And tools like Celebrite allow authorized government entities access to most devices. And there are safeguards that can be put in place to protect yourself from even a tool as sophisticated as Celebrite. Keeping your device up to date is one of the best ways you can go about doing that. Having the most current operating system on your device is one of the best ways to go about it. Having non-antiquated devices themselves. If you're using an iPhone 6, you're probably in bad shape. If you're using the newest iPhone with the newest software, you're probably in good shape. And so, there are different ways to go about hardening your devices to protect yourself, not only from legitimate actors that want access to your device, but illegitimate ones as well. You can keep the spyware off of your devices by using the same sort of protection and keeping your devices updated. There's another tool that is a little bit harder to employ, but it's called host locking. You can lock your mobile device to a supervision host, which basically means your laptop is the host that sets up your device, and then you prevent your device from pairing to any other computer. And most of the time when you have spyware installed on a device or you have someone that hacked your device, it's because they plugged your device into a computer. And if you've locked it to a specific host, it won't pair with any other devices. And that can be a pivotal thing to keeping your device secure from Celebrite, from spyware of any kind, because it has to come from your own device. And, if I don't know if you've ever traveled to China, but oftentimes people come back and they say, when I was going through customs at the airport, they plugged my device into a computer there. And either you have the right to say no, and they're going to put you on a plane and you're going to go right back to where you came from. But if you want access to the country, you have to allow them to plug your device into their computer at their customs agent. And that gives them a full image of your phone. And what they're doing with your data after that is anyone's guess, but it's frightening. And if your
Yeah.
device is host locked, they don't have the ability to do that. So it's a step worth considering. It is sort of a sophisticated step. And to your point, that's one of those things that it's easier to ask someone for help to do if you're not overtly tech savvy. So there are things you can do to protect yourself. And yes, there are certainly good and bad uses of all of these different services.
Wow. Wow. And I'm just going to, before we go, ask you if someone is watching or watches this in the future and wants to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Sure, I have a website, steelefamlaw.com. It's got all of my contact information. It's got my cybersecurity website on there. It's got my blog. If you want to get hold of me, you will not find a shortage of ways to do that using that website. And I'm always here, happy to answer questions for anybody about privacy, security, family law, anything.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, I could have asked a ton more questions, and maybe we'll do another one because I still have AI issues I don't understand. But until then, we're out of time. And thank you so much for being here today to talk about this. This is a topic that everybody worries about, is front and center in a ton of family law cases. And you were able to make it understandable, even though it is incredibly complex. So thank you for doing that today.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today. If anyone has further questions on today's topic, you can post it here and we can get you connected in Jonathan, or you can just contact him directly yourself. Until next time.